We're going to dive into Lightroom Classic today. We're going to take a look at how you can make the most out of some of your wildlife photos. Add a bit of drama, add a bit of mood, maybe a bit of color grading. We're going to be using masks. Don't you worry about that. Let's dive in. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. Let's jump into Lightroom Classic. We're going to look at two photos today. We're going to look at this one of a squirrel. Now we've got some nice light to be playing around with here. We're certainly going to be doing some color grading, a little bit of stylizing with this one. And we're going to take a look at this photo here, which is a bird photo. A blue tit, a great tit? I actually don't know. I thought I did know. I was very confident coming into the video, and now I think about it, I don't know. So absolutely let me know if you do know, or I feel like I should know. It's fine. It's fine. We're going to edit the photo anyway. And we're going to look at this photo, which is, again, a little bit of there's a bit of mood, right? We've got a cloudy day on this one. You know, we're shooting with the trees, high ISO, right? Nice soft light. We're going to take a look at both of these photos. Let's start off with our squirrel friend here, because I think the light is interesting in this one, right? The very first thing that I'm going to do is just warm this up. I immediately think that we just need to inject a little bit of warmth into this, maybe even quite a bit. Something like that, I think, looks a lot better immediately. I think we can bring those highlights down a little bit. I think we're getting a little too warm in terms of the brightness of those highlights on the tail and stuff like that. We might bring the shadows up just a touch. I'm going to bring the clarity and the texture up a little bit and the vibrance up. And I think that's immediately looking actually quite nice. If we look at before and after, that's where we started. It's where we've got to some very, very slight adjustments. And we've really made quite a big difference, I think, immediately. Of course, that's not where we're going to stop. Let's actually come down here and look at the HSL sliders. This is where we can adjust a lot of the different colors in the photo. So let's look at the hue to begin with. I'm actually going to bring the orange just over to the left a little bit. Don't want to go too crazy. We want to keep it reasonably natural. The yellow as well, I'm going to bring over just to the left a little bit, just sort of warming up those colors a bit as well. The green, I want to make sure is nice and kind of lush and vibrant, a summery green, right? And then we're going to bring the blues just a touch over towards the aqua. Let's go into the saturation. I'm actually going to bring those oranges down just a tiny bit, because I don't want there to be too much coming through on our squirrel friend here. It is a grey squirrel. We've done this before with grey squirrels, and I think I ended up making it way too red, which is not ideal. So we want to make sure we keep it. It's a grey squirrel, right? We want to keep it grey. We don't want to add too much of that orange into it. So I'm just going to come all the way down to the calibration tool at the bottom. I'm going to bring the red primary over towards the orange a little bit and the blue primary over towards the teal a little bit. Nothing too crazy, but I'm liking the kind of direction the colors are moving in with this photo. I think it's looking pretty nice. Now let's do a little bit of masking to play around with the light a little bit. So I'm going to come in here, do a radial gradient. The first thing I'm going to do is a nice sort of big radial gradient, roughly somewhere like that, and just brighten that a little bit, just the exposure up. I'm going to come in and actually bring in a linear gradient in the direction of the sunlight. I'm going to bring it in just like that, a bit of exposure, and we're going to bring the dehaze down a little bit, because that's going to help sort of give us a feeling of sunlight. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of warmth to this as well. Nothing too crazy, but something like that. Now the photo is immediately quite a bit brighter, so I'm going to come back in and lower the overall exposure of the photo, maybe just bump that contrast up a little bit. I'm also going to come back in, do another mask, a linear gradient mask this time, from the bottom left, and this time I'm actually going to bring that exposure down just a touch, nothing too crazy, but something like that. I also want to bring in a linear gradient across the back here. Now I'm going to intersect this mask with, so I've gone in, I've right clicked, intersect mask with, select background. That's going to actually have it appear only behind the squirrel. So we've got the linear gradient still, but only when it actually intersects with everything that isn't our subject, which in this case is the squirrel. I'm also going to come in, left click on this mask and subtract a linear gradient. I want to take off most of the foreground here. And essentially what I'm doing is trying to get a mask that just moves across the background that we can then play around with. So let's just change this. That is roughly the mask I want to get. And I'm going to darken this down a little bit. So we're just darkening that background behind our squirrel, behind this log, just to darken all of this. That is immediately looking quite a lot better, I think. We can turn off all the masks by just clicking and holding on this eye icon. You can see just how much of a difference that is actually making. So I think that's actually really, do you know what? That's really guiding the light in the way that I would like it to go. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is actually come in and just crop the photo a little bit. I don't think we need it to be quite as wide as it is. So let's look at something like that. I think that's actually really, really nice. I might even just bring the contrast up a little bit more, maybe even warm this a touch more. And then the last thing I might do, just to stylize this a little bit, I'm going to come down to the tone curve. Not something we play around with that often in Lightroom, but let's have a look. Let's go over to the blue channel here. And essentially what I'm going to do is pop a point in the shadows, and I'm just going to move that towards the blue, and then pop a point further up here, the highlights, and move that down towards the yellow. I'm going to be incredibly subtle with it, because I think if you go really very far at all, you can really start to mess up the colors in the photo. But I think it gives us a very subtle color grade to the photo. I'm also going to come to the white channel here. I'm going to pop a point in the shadows, which I'm just going to lower a little bit. And then I'm going to bring the overall black point up, just to bring in a little bit of a faded kind of effect to the photo. Something like this. Now, this is now verging into, it's very much personal preference, right? We're stylizing the photo a little bit. But I feel like it gives us a little bit of a different feel to the image, right? It gives us a slightly, to me, that now feels very early morning kind of feel to things. Now, let's look at it before and after. This is where we started, and this is where we've taken it to. What is interesting, though, is everything we've done with the tone curve, I think, is, up for debate as to whether or not that needs to be applied to the photo. Of course, this is all subjective, but, if I was to click and hold on the eye icon, you might absolutely prefer the photo like that. It's a little bit more natural, shall we say, edited without going too far. This is applying more of a feel, a style to it. So that's an interesting thought, right? But this is where we started. This is where we've ended up, or without the tone curve, we've ended up here. Let's move over to the photo of our bird friend here that we're now going to edit. We're going to do a sort of similar kind of thing here, but we're going to try and keep this nice and sort of moody as well, because we've got some interesting, moody, slightly soft lighting, so we can play around a little bit with this. Let's go ahead and just warm this up. I think immediately that's going to help a little bit. I'm also going to bring the contrast up a touch. Otherwise, I think I can leave a lot of this alone. A little bit of clarity, maybe a bit of texture, a little bit of vibrance. Something that's interesting about this photo, it's a little bit noisier, right? We're shooting at ISO 5000. So what I'm going to do is actually come down in Lightroom, and there's a little tick box just down here under the detail panel. Denoise. I'm going to click that. If it's a raw photo, Lightroom is absolutely able to go in and do an incredibly good job at just denoising the photo. It does a really, really solid job. It's very easy. You just tick that on, and there we are. We've now got a much, much cleaner photo. Now, it's never going to be as sharp, right? Because it was a noisier photo. In an ideal world, maybe I would have used slightly different settings when I was shooting the photo. But if you've ever had experience shooting small birds like this, they don't tend to hang around very long. It just need to be on it, quick, and just nail the shot. Now, perfect world, I probably wouldn't have got this branch actually in front of our bird friend here. But you know what? You just have to get the shot that you get. And in this case, I'm actually quite happy with the shot. Do I wish the branch wasn't there? Yes. Was there a lot I could do about it? No. I probably had, 5 seconds to get a shot, and I'm pretty happy with the shot that I got. So, we're gonna work with what we've got. And that's part of photography, right? Let's go ahead and enter the masking panel, because that's absolutely, I think, where we're gonna do most of what we're gonna do with this photo. We're gonna pop a nice big radial gradient over the middle of the image. Let's pop that there and brighten that up a little bit. It's going to help kind of draw the viewer's eye towards the subject of the photo. We're going to go in and do another radial gradient, this time nice and big. I'm going to bring that roughly in the middle. I'm going to click invert, and let's just darken this down. That's going to give us a nice kind of vignette feel to the image, which I quite like. Okay, let's go in and do a linear gradient now, coming in from the top left. Again, we're going to do a little bit of sort of sunlight simulation here. So a bit of exposure up there, negative dehaze, something like this. I think that looks quite nice. I'm going to go in and actually subtract from this mask another linear gradient from the bottom left, something like that. And maybe even another linear gradient from the top, something like that. And then if we press O, we can now see where we're kind of getting this mask coming in. And it really is just coming in kind of across this top left corner and then down onto our subject, which I quite like. So we're going to work with that, I think, but we're going to go ahead and do another linear gradient here. We're probably going to do a couple of these. From the bottom right, I'm going to bring that exposure down a touch. It's going to really kind of accentuate that vignette feel. I'm actually going to add to this same mask another linear gradient from the bottom left, something like that. That looks quite nice. And then one more from the top right, something like that. So we've really accentuated. We've got light coming in from the top left corner, but otherwise it's quite dark all around the bird. Now let's go ahead and come back to the overall editing panel. We've not really played much with the colors in this photo. So we're going to go down to the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders. We're going to bring the orange down just a little bit. The greens I'm going to bring over towards kind of being a nice, rich, lush green. The blue's just a little bit of aqua there. We're going to come over to the saturation. I actually want to bring some of the saturation out of those greens. I want them to be nice and dark. I'm going to come over to the luminance and just darken that as well. And then I might also just bring down the oranges a little bit so that we're really focusing on the colors in the bird here in the middle of the photo. The next thing I might do as well is just come over to the point color, which is also within the color mixer panel. I'm just going to use the eyedropper tool to select this color here in the background, which I'm just going to bring the saturation down. Now, this is going to affect some of the colors on the bird as well. So what I'm going to do is just bring that range down. We can visualize the range. We can see exactly which colors are being affected. And you can see it's pretty much just in the background and a little bit on the branch as well. But that's just going to help, I think, hopefully, to really focus our viewer's eye onto our subject, which is, of course, the bird. Now, let's come back up to the main area where we have our sort of basic sliders here. I'm actually going to bring the overall vibrance up a little bit, maybe even the saturation, which might sound a little bit counterintuitive to everything I've just done. But now we're really seeing the colors pop a little bit with our subject, but without being distracting all around, which is quite nice. Okay, this is looking pretty good, I think. One more thing I might do is actually just affect the tint of this photo. I might just bring the green in a little bit more. Nothing crazy. This can sometimes happen in more forested photos, right? Where you've got a lot of green in the image. Sometimes the camera can overcorrect and actually add in a lot of magenta. But I think that looks immediately better, a little bit more natural, a little bit more real. Now, again, we could leave it there. Let's look at a before and after. So this is where we started. This is where we've got to. So we've really played with the colors, the exposure, and just pushed our viewer's eye towards the subject. We could, again, come down to the tone curve, maybe go to that blue channel, add a little bit of blue with the shadows, and then again, just balance that out with moving towards the yellow with the highlights. That's just going to affect the photo a little bit. So it's reasonably subtle. I actually quite like it. It's a little more subtle in this one, which is quite nice. If we just click and hold on this eye icon, you can see this is without the tone curve adjustment, and this is with. We're just adding a little bit of a color grade there. I quite like that. I'm not going to play with the white channel. I don't think we need to do that. I think for this photo, actually some reasonably high contrast is quite nice. I might just boost that contrast a little bit more. I think that's looking really quite nice. We've got two photos there, edited slightly differently. That's before and then after for the bird photo. And for our squirrel friend, of course, again, let's take a look. Before and then after. I'm really quite happy with both of these photos, right? Actually, these kind of local wildlife, great way to practice your wildlife photography, right? In terms of finding good light and then waiting and being patient in terms of actually the technical side of it, of actually bringing the lens up and making sure you get the shot, in terms of kind of your patience, your ability to be in the right place at the right time. It's a great way to practice that stuff before you head out to kind of more, exotic wildlife where you may have to travel a little bit more to get those shots. If you practice kind of nearby, there's loads of wildlife to photograph all around the UK in particular. I mean, everywhere really. And you can get some great shots, some great practice. I love doing it. I love going to my local kind of parks and stuff like that and be able to get shots like this. It's a great way to be able to explore that side of photography, but anytime, pretty much just any time. Now, I'd love to know, what do you think about this? Is there anything you would have done slightly differently to these edits? Let me know in the comments. I always think that's super interesting. It's such a subjective field. I think it's so interesting to know how how different people would approach different things. So let me know. That's always super interesting. There's a full list of all the kit we use for these videos, for these photos, everything down in the description as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe because there's new content all the time. I'll see you in the next video. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.